Michelangelo talks about the problem most people have in life is not setting their bar too high and not reaching it. It's that we bar too low and we reach it all the time.
Another day, another way. Sometimes the song beats the ground. Another day, yet another way. Sometimes the rain falls on down. Another day, another setting for it.
Today on the FILIGHTER podcast, we forge new territory with an author literally between his second and third stop on his first book tour. This promises to be a legendary episode. The book we're discussing is Stacked, Your Super Serious Guide to Modern Money Management by Saul-Sehy and Emily Guy Birkin. I will admit, I've got a short name for the book. It's called Stacked, Your S-Squared Guide to M Cubed. For those math lovers, right, Joe? Hey, the Stacked Tour, you'll be about 40 cities, and fortunately for the FILIGHTER community, the Houston, Texas stop is near my home base in College Station. Saul-Sehy is a creator and co-host of the award-winning Stacking Benjamins podcast. This fall, I met Joe and OG at FinCon 21 in Austin, where Joe received the Lifetime Achievement Award. He and his team have numerous accolades and achievements and are major players, well known in the personal finance space. Joe, hey, say hello, man.
Dude, hi. You said my first book tour. I bet it's my last book tour. The way we're on stop number 3, and as you know already, OG and Doug were supposed to be here by now. They got held up in Austin. They sent me on commercial airlines because of the fact that I had to be here on time because it's my book tour, and my luggage got lost. So,
reality bites sometimes,
it
Joe.
does.
I mean,
totally
I hate to picture someone signing all these books in your place. I would have gotten a haircut and put on different glasses if I had to.
Oh, I would have had both my hairs cut. Yeah, right.
So, Joe, let's talk a little bit about several things. Let's cover a little bit about the book tour, then we'll talk about the book itself. And then I want to wrap up with some discussion about the Stacking Benjamins podcast. How's that sound today?
Yeah, cool.
That's good. That's good. Hey, well, let's get back to it. So you're literally in the middle of this Texas book tour, as we call it, part of the world book tour for the Stacked book rollout. How's it getting started? Now, you're right in between stop number 2 and 3. So maybe, are you in a rhythm yet? Is there consistency? Is it chaos?
Yeah, it's fun. It is chaos. But I was talking to my friend Paula Pant this morning. We were chatting, and she reminded me of something that I said to her a long time ago. I told her that it's like a runner because I've run 11 marathons. And as a runner, when you first start getting into it, you don't have any rhythm. You don't know what's going on. But the more your body gets attuned to it and gets into it, the easier it gets. And you kind of get used to the pace. Like you set up what I used to do because I ran in college much faster than I wasn't quite as fat then as I am now. So when I ran in college, though, I always knew you went out at a fast pace and you tried to keep it, right?
Right.
And so we decided to set the bar high at 40 cities, and which is just way too many. But I'd rather have too many and see as many people as we can and hang out with as many cool people as we can than leave stuff on the table. And Paula said that it's just like I told her about running, that I just need to set a fast pace. It's going to be there's going to be some wrinkles, but I'm going to learn very quickly, I think, to roll with the punches. But right now, I'm on day 3. I'm exhausted, but I'm also ready to party in Houston tonight with our Houston friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Haven't quite felt the runner high yet, I bet. But, you talk about size and marathons, man. My apex running is a half-half. We ran a marathon relay, so I call it a half-half marathon.
I love the relays. Well, I just like the teamwork in it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And you feel good, the 4 of you. I mean, it's the same thing we talk about. Everything doesn't have to be a personal finance analogy, but there is one. Right. Personal finance is way more fun when you surround yourself with like-minded people.
And it's a marathon.
Absolutely.
It's no sprint.
Yes.
That's why I'm good for it.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay, Joe, so you're starting in Texas, right?
Yeah.
Why'd you start in Texas other than it being kind of a home turf for you guys?
That actually is why, is because I knew that I could have OG, my co-host, with me in Texas. It was going to be a couple easy stops. Also at the time, when we first were planning this, the tour's been pushed back 3 months. And so we were going to start, 2 months. Right. We were going to start at the beginning of the year. And because of COVID variants, the Omicron variant, we pushed it back 2 months. And Texas was going to be an easier place for us to begin, but frankly, because of COVID rules.
Right.
We could, and we had them in these, and it's the reason why tonight we're going to be at a microbrewery around the country, especially the first part of the tour, we're in a lot of microbreweries because it was space for people to fan out. You could get some space if you wanted it, but you could still hopefully come see us.
Right. I saw some postings on Twitter, people sitting outside in patio areas and such.
Now, later in the tour, what's interesting is we were planning this. The whole first part then is microbreweries. The second half of the tour, all of a sudden, bookstores and libraries wanted to partner with us. Like as soon as COVID numbers started hitting the floor just a couple weeks ago.
They jumped in.
Yes. So starting in like Washington, D.C., which is about city 15, we're in a great bookstore in Arlington called Hooray for Books. In Philadelphia, we're with Hilltop Bookstore, which is actually... It's a cool used bookstore that is aligned with the library. Like overflow books that the library has, they sell.
Right, and surplus type.
Yes, and they give the proceeds to the library. So we'll be at Hilltop Books in Philadelphia. In Boston, we're at the Medford Public Library. In New York, it looks like we'll be at Barnes & Noble in Manhattan.
Wow.
Yeah, so anyway, but we started in Texas partly for a couple of reasons, to answer your first question, which is, number one, I could have OG, my longtime co-host, with me. It's really comfortable working with him. So that was a nice start. It was going to be easier because of COVID rules. Also, some short trips. It's a short hike from my home in Texarkana and Mom's basement over to Dallas, then down to Austin. I hoped people in San Antonio would forgive us that we skipped them because we went to Austin. They're only an hour apart. Then
I-35 can be unpredictable.
That is true. That is not even unpredictable. It's downright ugly. But then, of course, over here to Houston, and then tomorrow I leave for the West Coast. I'll be in San Francisco next, and then San Diego, LA, then Portland, Seattle, and then fly down to Miami.
Wow. Well, that is quite a trip. Kind of around the world in 80 days or less, much less, right?
It's funny. I'm frugal like everybody in our community in a lot of ways. I do spend money, but I've developed this fear that I'm going to overspend. So I really am allergic to spending money, even though I'm a natural spender. It's like, know yourself, right? I spent points that I had for as many of the flights that I had to take as possible. I'm usually like the last row, the cheapest row that I can get on a plane.
Serious travel hack, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the two things that I did, the two long flights I've got from Houston to San Francisco, and then that Seattle to Miami flight's going to be a bear. Those two flights, out of all the flights I do, and I think there's going to be 23 or 24 flights. I'm going first class.
Oh, man, that's for the long rides.
For the long rides.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If you're going to spend it wisely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Bang for the buck. There's something about a value equation when you talk about frugality. I'm very much a value-focused guy.
Yeah.
I don't mind spending the money for the value. Yeah.
It's funny that you say that, and I know this is probably a tangent, but when I was a financial planner for 16 years, and what really always made me sad was when people skimped on the things they told me they valued because they were too busy blowing money on stuff that they didn't.
Right.
And it really frustrated me to see people that would refuse to spend money. And I don't know, don't cheapen your life,
Right. When there's another family you're close to and the kids are growing up and you decide, hey, I'm going to do a ski trip or something and we're going to drive, we're going to keep it reasonable. And you invite that family and they got a couple of BMWs in the garage, but there's no way they can afford the ski trip.
Yeah. No, exactly.
It's just a matter of setting parameters.
I actually have family members that are exactly what you described. Exactly.
Well, it sounds like the tour is going to be quite busy, but tell us, what would someone expect if they made it to one of your tour stops? They register. What's the event like?
Yeah, cool. It is super casual and laid back, number one, because as you know already, that's our brand, right?
A little bit low stress.
Yes, our brand is definitely approachable and no judgment, and let's just get as many people involved in money discussions as possible. And the events are meant to reflect those. So we usually start the presentation, unless it's at a library bookstore. Library bookstore, we're going to start the presentation presentation right at the time it says on the schedule. So
yeah.
if in your city, I'm at a library bookstore, it's going to start on time. But if it's at a microbrewery,
the schedule's a little more fluid, so to speak.
Yeah, and we start, and everybody can have a beer or two.
Get ramped up a little bit.
Absolutely. So we start half an hour in. Mm-hmm. I'm partnering because as you know, doing what you and I do, you get to know people all over the U.S.
Right.
And I've been doing it 10 years. So in every city, I've got a friend of mine who's somebody who's influential in the space, who's going to be our MC. As an example, here in Houston, it's Sharita Humphrey.
Wow.
And Sharita, by the way, has gotten, I don't know if you know her, but she's gotten the key to the city. Houston gave her the key to the city for the education that she's done here.
She's got a key to the fourth largest city in the country.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, I know,
That's
right?
got to be a big key.
That's got to be huge. Yeah, she's unlocked Houston. I don't know what's inside Houston, but she's got that key.
No, that's phenomenal. You know, I started my career literally just a few blocks from here back when there were 8 accounting firms, 8 big 8s, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I walked these streets many times, and I had flashbacks as I drove in, because this doesn't change. The green lights all go straight for a little while, then they go 90 degrees perpendicular. So when you feel a yellow light coming, you look for the next one-way street that goes the way you want to go, and you hit the gas, because those are going to turn green.
So you know how to go zigzag and get where you want to go faster.
You know, I don't really drive poorly, Joe, but my wife says my pickup is not the Miata, okay?
So Sharita, as an example tonight,
right.
is going to have maybe 4 planned questions. And we're learning as we go. What we used to have in Dallas and in Austin, we had 8 questions that were planned. And Sharita comes up with those, and she and I just kind of talk about it. But we've cut that from 8 to 4.
The two of you
just
front,
the two of us in front of everybody, just chat. And then after those 4 questions, we open it up for Q&A. And we're actually going to scale that back too, because like last night people asked questions for almost 90 minutes. And there were some people that had to go. And then afterwards I was signing books, and there was a guy, poor Richard, he was a super guy. He had to cut in line because he's like, I'm sorry, I was supposed to be home like half an hour ago. And I felt horrible. So we're gonna actually have probably 20 minutes of Q&A with me and whoever the MC is. And if Emily's with me, or if OG and Doug are with me like tonight, they'll be involved in part of that. And then as much Q&A as we can hit in about 30 minutes after that. And then people can keep asking us questions. I saw Penn and Teller a long time ago. I don't know if you've ever seen them. The cool thing about Penn and Teller, the magicians, I saw them in Kansas City. They ran to the back of the room after they said, thank you for coming. Yep. And literally, instead of going backstage, they ran right through the crowd to the back. And every person who wanted to, that was in line to shake their hand or get a picture, whatever, they stayed until the end of the night.
Wow.
And it just made this impression on me.
Commitment to community.
Absolutely. And, and community is what we're all about. So I'll tell all of your friends listening that if you come to one of our events and you want to talk to us, we're going to stay there. Like, don't make me stay there forever just to prove my point.
But if they feel like they really want to say hello to Joe, they need to stay and do it.
Yes. Because we will stay as long as you want to be there.
The first time I met you, Joe, you guys were willing to talk to anybody out at FinCon.
Yeah, but who did you know what's funny? It is I would like to say that is me. I mean, to some degree it is me, but I have to say that I learned that from the FinCon community.
Right. I mean, I visited with Paula Pant when I was out there, several others.
Yes.
Rob Berger, I talked to him. I just literally read his book right beforehand.
It's so brilliant.
I brought his book with me the next day to get him to sign it, and I just couldn't track him down. I was so bummed. But yeah.
I remember when and this is kind of you learn because of people that came before you. So I'm considered one of the old guys now at FinCon that have been around forever.
Right.
But when I started, I remember going to my first FinCon, which was the second one. And I remember seeing JD Roth and Jeff Rose and Jim Wang. I remember I was getting, Jim Wang had a great site called Bargaineering, which is one of the first top sites. And I'm making myself like a bagel because they used to have food like outside the main area because it was so small. And I'm making myself a bagel. And Jim Wang comes up and goes, "Hey, I'm Jim. How you doing?" And I'm like, oh, it's this guy. And we just kind of start talking. Then I look at his name tag and I'm like, this is Jim. Yeah, I'm talking to Jim Wang. Yes. I had no idea.
Yeah, right.
I went around the corner at one point and a guy named Adam Baker, who used to really be in the space. Man versus Debt was his blog. He doesn't do it anymore. But JD Roth and Ramit Sethi were sitting together, the three of them having a chat. And I just walked up and I said, hey guys, I said, I just want to say I'm big fans of all of your work. And they were all, and now, I can't tell you, but Ramit and I talk maybe 5 or 6 times a year. Yeah. JD is like my bud.
Oh, man.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a community.
Yes. Those guys did it to me.
Right.
Liz Weston. I mean, I mentioned a bunch of guys. Liz Weston did that too. Liz is amazing. So I feel like whenever anybody comes up to me and wants to talk to me, it is my job.
You guys are giving everybody a hand up. I mean, I feel absolutely like I can approach people and talk to others in the industry.
A fan of ours asked us this last night in Austin. She said, she's like, I know that you're on Paula Pant's show all the time. She's on Stacking Benjamins all the time. Do you guys ever feel any pressure to steal stuff from each other to kind of fight? And the answer is, that Dave Ramsey, and this is going to be a roundabout way of answering this, but Dave Ramsey doesn't publish his numbers, but he's got the biggest podcast in our space. He and Planet Money, right?
I see it in the rankings.
Yes. And so you take those two podcasts, and Dave doesn't talk about what his numbers are, neither does Planet Money, but most people say it's about 1 to 1.5 million per episode.
Yeah.
People listen. So let's say that it's even 2 million. So
I'm still working on my first million, Joe. So
you got 2 million for Dave. You've got 2 million for Planet Money. You've got you've got us. You've got Jonathan and Brad at Choose FI. You've got Paula. You've got Joel and Matt at How to Money. You've got Farnoosh, Tarabi. You've got, you just the Frugal Friends. You got all the, you take all of our podcasts put together, and there's maybe 40 million people listening. Maybe.
Wow.
Out of 350 million people in the United States. So, and that's the way I answered this woman's question. I'm like, we don't steal each other because we know nobody's listening.
There is so much upside in growth of the market and podcast adoption.
We totally need to, if our true mission is not to beat the hell out of each other, but really is to grow the space.
And I've got a question down here that really is something I'm going to suck up to the top now. Your passion for financial education and the need for people to understand these life type issues is something that's shared across the board.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. No, that's something that, it's something I'm really passionate about. I mean, let's get more people involved. Right. So we do need, so if you're listening to Paul and I right now, you start a podcast, start a blog. And you know what? People are like, well, the space just seems so saturated. Listen to quite a few shows, kind of figure out where your space is and do it.
Yeah, I hear you, because I'm in a podcasting group, and earlier on, as we all started launching our podcast, would have these group calls once a month. And, people would talk about how things were going, what their challenges were, what they were facing. And groupthink, we'd help each other and support each other. Yeah. And then someone would throw out what their downloads were on their last episode or what their total downloads are. You want to say, yay, rah, rah, but crap, how come I'm not doing that well? Yeah.
A lot of people listening might know the brand Bigger Pockets.
Oh, I listen to them frequently. Yeah.
And Josh Dorkin, this is another FinCon story. Josh Dorkin at an early FinCon, he sat on my right and Brandon Turner sat on my left. And I'm sitting between these two guys that are icons. Right. And Josh and I have become, and Brandon and I have become good friends since then. But I was talking about our show, and Josh pulled up his laptop and showed me his downloads. And this is maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago. Uh-huh. And we're getting a few downloads here and there because our podcast is pretty darn new. And he's pulling 50, at that time, 60,000 downloads an episode. And I immediately went, I told him, I'm like, Josh, I will never get there. And he literally, pre-COVID, put his arm around me and he said, don't compare my middle to your beginning. Don't do it. He's like, that'll suck all the fun out of it. He goes, just do what you do, keep doing what you do, and the numbers will, if you get obsessed with the numbers, you're going to kill the joy and people are going to hear it, and it's just going to be this horrible thing.
Well, you lose that natural authenticity, and you start to be focused on what is it I've got to do
Yes.
to get a number, instead of this is what I believe, this is who I am. My crowd, my tribe is going to find me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when it's funny you say that, I don't know if I've ever said this, if you and I have said this when I've talked before, but I had a mentor early on who said that, a woman named Katana, who was incredible. Katana said, and this was about being a financial planner, but I think it's true for anything.
Right.
You will attract people that are like you, and you'll repel people who aren't. And it's funny because when you look at negative reviews of our show, they're always people that don't fit my mission. These are people that want more efficiency. They want tips per minute. Like, how can I give more tips per minute? Because the only negative review we get all the time is that we screw around too much.
Hey, Joe, do they know there's a skip 30-second button on podcasts?
All right. Yeah, so they could go ahead and
if they wear an Apple Watch, it's just a tip tap on the wrist.
But there's also lots of other shows out there. And I'm clearly not ever going to be that person because our goal is surround sound. It's not tips per minute.
That's right. That's
Yes.
right. You know, I frequently enjoy listening to Trivia Question and all the craziness that is on the podcast. I want to talk more about your podcast later. Let's talk about the book. I got to go back to something we talked about earlier. You are literally wearing a BCS marathon finisher shirt. And, that's Bryan College Station for
Yes.
those of you that don't know. So I live in that area. In the last half marathon my wife ran was the BCS half marathon.
At the time that I got this was the fastest marathon I'd ever run. Because as you know, it's very flat.
Well, yeah.
It's fast. It is beautiful. And the students come out at A&M.
Massive support.
When you run through campus, I was hurting. It's about the 17, 18 mile mark, if I remember right.
Right.
And so I'm just dying. And all of a sudden, there's students all over me, and I was revived.
Yeah.
Like, it was fantastic. And because of that, I ran my best time.
Yeah, well, I confess, I am an Aggie, so I know that it's God's country, and when I had a chance to move back there, I was so excited. But
Well, I've got a special place in my heart for Aggies, mostly because of the Corps, because I went to the Citadel, the military college of
Wow,
South Carolina.
yeah.
So any school that has a Corps of cadets has a fond place in my heart.
Well, it's neat to be in a city that really is pro support for the military, and I can't say enough about how many goosebumps you get when you're sitting in Kyle Field and the flyover happens before the game.
Yeah. Oh.
I just yell USA as loud as I can. It's magic. It's magic. Well, hey, let's talk a little bit about why you're here in our city. Stack the book. Yes, I'm going to make sure, since you mentioned it, you sign mine before I leave here today.
That's right. Yeah. No waiting in line for Paul.
Buddy. So, there's a lot. There's countless personal finance books on the shelf. What makes this book unique?
Man, I'm in a lucky space where our show's 3 times a week, and 2 of those shows have a featured interview. So for the last 10 years, I've been interviewing 2 people a week, roughly. Not for that whole time. Initially, we weren't 3 days a week, but for a good 7 or 8 of those years. And so I get to see a lot of the space, right? I get to see a lot of the books. And what I notice is most of the books are fairly heavy, and they're presented as heavy, and they're presented for depth. And that doesn't make them bad, by the way. That makes them really good. Like Morgan Housel's book is fantastic as a new book. Of course, J.L. Collins' book is fantastic.
Yeah.
But also Vicki Robbins' book, which is kind of the bedrock if you want money philosophy. But they're all presented with this depth and this heart. And the thing that was always missing for me was a book that was much more an introductory book. My favorite book before this, when it came to personal finance, was Rick Edelman's The Truth About Money.
Okay.
And it's a good book. It presents things surprisingly in a funny way. But besides that book, which wasn't still as funny as I wanted it, there wasn't anything that presented it lightly. So I started off with this project and brought Emily in later. I'd written a book for over 10 years. I got serious about it the last couple of years, and I finished it. I handed it to my alpha reader, my wife, Cheryl.
Cheryl, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
to Cheryl. And Cheryl, about 18 minutes later, told me that it sucked. Like in the nicest way possible.
She didn't even get through the first chapter. How fair is that?
It was incredibly fair, dude, because it was horrible.
You poured your heart into this book.
Well, here's the thing. The book was not written in the way that we like to teach and talk about money. It was written in a heavy manner, like a lot of the books that are out there.
Right, where I have to kind of read the pages 3 times sometimes.
Yeah, and it wasn't congruent with our mission, which is a very introductory mission. We don't want to be the last word in personal finance. We want to be the first word, right?
Right. You're swinging for the 95 percenters, not the 5% funkiness.
Yes.
It's like, this is the fairway. If people understand the fairway, life is 99% easier.
Well, and then if I can introduce you to people, so I think a good analogy for our show is an airport. I just left the airport and there's all these planes.
Right.
My job is to introduce you to the different planes that are out there that we like, and then you decide which plane you get on.
Right.
And we show you all these different paths to victory. But that book didn't do that. So I was frustrated. We were on a trip out to Portland, Oregon, and I was in this great bookstore called Powell's. And I like to wander bookstores and go through the different sections.
I'm guilty.
And I just get
titles just jump off the shelves at you.
Yeah, you get this inspiration and this stuff that you didn't realize that you loved.
You didn't know you needed it.
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't know.
And you and I haven't talked a ton, but we've talked enough for you to know this is believable.
Right.
I am in the kids section, which is totally me. And I see the Hardy Boys Detective Manual.
Oh, man. Classics.
I carried this book around everywhere in 4th grade. My brother and I, we dog-eared it. But here's the thing. It wasn't like a Hardy Boys story. It was actually a manual written with the help of a real-life FBI agent.
Kind of a how-to.
Yes. And they tell you that at the very beginning. So, my brother and I, we would, on a rainy day, we'd go out and look at the tire tracks that my dad left for work, and we'd examine the tire tracks like it told us in the book. My mom would touch a doorknob, and we'd be over there with the tape getting her fingerprint because you don't know where mom's been.
Right.
Yeah. And I immediately thought, this is the tone I need. That is the tone, the Hardy Boys Detective Manual. So then we fly home. I was living in Michigan at the time.
Right.
And we fly home to Detroit. And I'm 50 years old, Paul. I'm 50 years old when this happens. I'm 54 now, but I was 50 when I started this journey. And my mom has finally, at 50, left this box of stuff from her attic that she couldn't trust me with until then.
Right.
Like my Little League pictures, the
special memory box.
Exactly. She handed them over, but in there was the Cub Scout Wolf Guide. And the cool thing is that people like you and I know that gamification is where it's at.
Right.
If you turn this into a game, what happens? You're going to fear it less. If you lose, you lose. Not a big thing. You just learn from it. Second, you're going to have this growth mentality toward doing it. And third, it becomes fun and you're an explorer. You're doing all this stuff.
Check it out, Joe. I even have I got a sign off here at the end of the book.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the structure. Structure of the book, because this is kind of unique. There's 4 parts or major sections, and there's 14 chapters. And then within each chapter, there's a combination of things. There's a tools you need list. Then there's the typical text kind of sprinkled with these focus highlighted tombstone features.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the chapter, there's a podcast interview excerpt. And the last thing you find is this checkoff list of achievements and a badge parent sign-off line.
Right.
Yeah.
Got to have your mom sign it at the bottom of each chapter.
Of course, because that proves it really happened, How did you guys decide on this overall structure and components?
Yeah. Well, that was it. It was the Cub Scout Wolf Guide, number 1. And so I had that down complete. I love showing proficiency at the end by having to check all these boxes by doing the things. Our tools that you need at the beginning are always kind of dorky. They're not.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, but then when we get into it, we present it very competently, but with a lot of humor in it. And then we get to that end, and I do like showing proficiency. And of course, the badges are just to pay homage to this idea.
Right. I mean, it's nice reinforcement of what we learned.
Absolutely. The funny thing about this, though, is that when we were pitching this to Penguin Random House, who's our publisher, we actually have the same editor as James Clear from Atomic Habits.
Okay, yeah, I've read that book.
Yes, and Nina, our editor, is amazing. But when we were pitching it to them, we're on Zoom calls because it's in the middle of COVID. And so Emily and I are on these calls and we're going, okay, here's what we want to do. We want to take the Hardy Boys Detective Manual and we want to combine it with the Cub Scout Wolf Guide, but we want it to be about money and we want it to be for adults. And Emily and I were both we were so sure that Penguin was going to hang up on us.
Are you really going for something that unique?
Right. And so, but frankly, I haven't seen that before. This book is not meant to be read end to end. You can read it end to end, and I think you'll get a lot out of it, but it's much more.
I like the word that you have in the title, and that word guide, because I I see this a little bit like that personal finance reference book.
Yes.
There's a chapter in there about insurance and how insurance, like I'm talking about, the house that burns down story, right?
Yes.
It's like how it works.
Yes.
And I think it's a great way to communicate the concept of insurance to people.
I love that story. And I'm glad you liked it, because that story I actually wrote about how insurance was developed, which is a total lie. It didn't happen like that. But in my head, it really explains, like, oh, this is how they kind of do this.
It's a classic parable lesson, man. Emily Guy Birkin, of course, is your co-author, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what it was like working with the notorious EGB.
I got so lucky, dude, because the reason I wanted to co-author after I had this idea was because of the fact I was reading a different book, and the author wrote in the back, it was a nonfiction book, and she wrote at the end of the book in this epilogue about how she'd had this book deal for 2 years and she'd done nothing. But this woman worked in publishing, and she's like, I'm surrounded by great writers. I interview great writers all the time. And I felt the same. I'm like, oh, if I do this, it's better to, you and I talked about this with running or anything else with finance, it's better to pack hunt. It's more fun to do it with somebody else. I'm surrounded by all these brilliant people. Why wouldn't I partner up with somebody?
Yeah.
My first choice was Emily, because Emily and I have been friends for a long time. She's got 4 books that are on bookstore shelves already. She's going to calm down any publisher that we would have, because she knows the ropes.
She's plugged into the industry, right?
Yeah, she knows how to get the stuff done. So I know the marketing side of it, and I'm not a bad writer, but Emily is very, very experienced in the area. And I was so honored when, once again, I called Emily, and she's like, I said, hey, I have this book idea, and I'm wondering if you want to partner with me. She goes, well, what is it? And I'm like, so there's the Hardy Boys Detective Manual.
Oh, no, the same story.
And the Cub Scout Wolf Guide.
Right.
Yeah, and I thought she was going to hang up on me, but she's like, that sounds awesome. Let's do it.
I know when you're working as a team with someone else, you bring strengths and they bring strengths, right?
Yeah.
Understand that perhaps maybe that you guys in your first draft of the manuscript had it a little bit long, maybe 50% long, like 120,000 words.
You did your homework.
What in the world happened, Joe?
You did your homework.
So, but one of you might have been a little better than the other on how do we get down.
Yeah. I mean, it is great when you've got so much knowledge poured into a book that you were supposed to write it, 85,000 words, and it ends up 50,000 too many.
Yeah, I hear Emily has a great Zoom background sometimes. When you're working with Emily Guy Birkin, that's Emily Stone Cold Guy Birkin, right?
Instead of her name, because... So what would happen, to explain what Paul's talking about to everybody, is that we would have these cutting sessions, and we'd go chapter by chapter, and she'd go, I think we cut this. And I'm like, no, that's good. And she's like, nope, we're cutting it. And she cuts it. And she's obviously the expert. And then we go on to the next thing. Let's cut it. And then I start joking about how horrible she is. So the next time we get on Zoom for our next thing, she's changed her name in the name box to Emily Stone Cold Guy Birkin.
So she became this, you had a theme song for her, right? Great story. Let's cut it.
It was.
You were full of them, right, Joe?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
kill your darlings.
Kill your darlings. Murder your darlings. Yeah. I am a fan of getting the thoughts on paper and then going back and weeding out the excess. But when 50% of it has to go, that's got to be painful, because you're married to some of those concepts, especially in your earlier drafts of the book. I bet they were in there. And it's like, I can't let that go.
You totally are. And we had to decide again. And if you read negative reviews of our book, which there's a couple, there's not a ton, but there are a couple. It's the same negative review we have about my podcast, which is it's an incredibly competent book. They screw around a lot.
Yeah,
I wish there weren't so many jokes.
Well, I want to bring up a little bit about the humor.
Yeah.
Because, I call it the H&H factor here. You and Emily seem to really have found a balance in being authentic in this book and getting lessons using your personal stories. Your humility is gigantic in this book, and another dominating constant throughout the book is the humor component. And I was wondering, does that just come from both of you? Is that something that's native in you guys?
Yeah. I mean, our podcast is funny because we work on comedy, but I like laughing. And this is my, as you know, Paul, this is my second quote career. And I tell people all the time, I feel so blessed to be in a job where if I'm laughing all day, we're doing our job right.
Right.
Yeah. How fun is that?
There is joy in this, buddy.
Yes. The more that I laugh, the better it is. So yeah, our goal was to make each other laugh. And she would write things. I had an audience of one for my chapters, and it was Emily. And if I could make Emily laugh, and I could surprise the hell out of her, and she would text me and go, "Oh my God, I just got to the something part, and I'm rolling on the floor." And same thing back. I'd be so surprised when she wrote the part about mutual funds, and she found herself writing the word mutual fund over and over, and all of a sudden she realized it was more fun if you just call them MFs, and it's even more fun if you do it in Samuel L. Jackson's voice.
I'm gonna confess that I had to look up on the Urban Dictionary some of the stuff that she posts from time to time. I mean, and then I looked over to my son and I said, he's 25, I guess, or close to it. Yeah. And I said, "Do you know what this means?" He says, "Dad, that's been around for 5 years."
Come on, Dad.
Yeah.
Well, I got to say, Emily's hippier than both of us combined.
No doubt about it. Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, I got 5 years on you, so I try to stay hip, but I am not as cool as I thought. You mentioned Emily. She did some drawing and illustrations in this book.
She did.
What's up with the fox and the unicorn?
Yeah, so Emily loves to draw, and she's taken cartooning classes, but she's never had her drawings in a book. And one day at the end of a long day of editing, she told me that, and I'm like, "I see your cartoons all the time. Why the hell aren't you making us cartoons?"
The window is open for this to happen.
Yes. Yeah. I'm like, "We have our book. Let's do it." So she's like, "Well, who do you want to be? Like, what animal are you?" She's like, "'Cause I'm a unicorn." And she's got like these unicorn clothing. Like if you see Emily, she either has clothing on it with a lightning bolt or unicorn or something crazy on it. And I'm like, "Well, you know what? I've just always identified with just the fox." And so she created this fox with the microphone. And it was pretty fun.
I like it. Yeah, I can see you in it.
At the end of every chapter, when we go into the interview from the show that kind of puts the cap on what we're talking about.
Right.
There's a picture of Joe as a fox with his microphone introducing the thing, and it came out really well.
So, I really like those interviews in each chapter, and I was just wondering, what is it like going through the archives and trying to decide what interview you're going to use, and are they fresh in your mind, or do you have to go back to the archives?
Each of the chapters came down to, there's 2 answers to this question. First one is, there were great people who didn't make the book because of the fact that they didn't talk about any of the things that ended up in the book. They talked about other things.
Yeah, just different shows.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but when I got down to investing, it was fairly easy to go back and remember 4 or 5 people. The hard part wasn't who to put in. The hard part was, when you've been around as long as I've been around, who's being left out?
Right.
And are they going to feel bad?
You really want to honor those key people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you want to honor it because there's so many great voices.
Well, I posted a picture on Twitter yesterday, and I had your book on the top of a stack of financial books.
I saw that.
And statistically, it does have a few pages in it, right?
It does.
You notice Ramit was lower.
I know. Yes.
Ramit. Just by a few pages, though.
Hey, Ramit.
Yeah.
We're talking to you, man.
Yeah.
Mine's better.
It's coming to you.
Well, and that's an example, as a good example. I had talked to Ramit about doing something in the book. He was on a tour doing other things at the time. Actually, I take that back. It was about endorsing it. He wasn't in the book about endorsing it. And and it was funny because I was talking to him. He came on our show and we're getting ready to hit record. And he's like, "Hey, how's your book going?" He goes, "Oh, crap. I never wrote something for your book." And I said, "No, but that's fine, man. You're a busy dude." But he goes, "I'll tell you what, my endorsement's not that big a deal." He goes, "I'm going to do you one better. I'm going to do," and this goes back to what you and I were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
He goes, "Afterwards, we'll take as long as you want, and I'll tell you about how I promoted my book." And so I got to talk to Ramit Sethi about how he promoted
very successful.
Yes,
book.
I Will Teach You to Be Rich. But you know what's funny? It's successful more because of the promotion.
Yeah.
The way he promoted it. Like, that's a book that lives on because he's such a good promoter.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, the title's not a bad one either.
No, it's a great title.
It rolls off pretty easy.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I featured it in one of my blog posts last summer.
Well, and speaking of titles, Emily's sister said to her, like halfway as we were through us writing the manuscript, she texted her and goes, hey, you know stack means big boobs, don't you? And Emily goes, I'm aware.
She's smarter than the average guy, man. No doubt about it. Hey, one of the things I also saw in the book, and in the content side, was one of my absolute favorite graphics by Paul Gerard. I don't know if it's his last name, but it's the one on asset classes in each year.
Yeah.
And I just think visually that tells such a story, kind of like what you actually even said yesterday in your podcast episode intro, is the markets are crazy right now.
Yeah.
But what does a smart guy do? Well, hopefully they have a finance investing policy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what's funny is that we had a question from a guy that was a beginning investor yesterday about this. And he actually admitted that when he first started investing, he realized that he looked at the 1-year return all the time. And what this chart that Paul's talking about shows, it takes a bunch of different asset classes and it compares them against each other every year. And there are different shades of gray in the book. And if you find it online, you'll see they're different colors.
Right. And they jump around.
Yes.
Year.
And what you'll notice is what a huge mistake you're making if you invest in the top thing from the year before.
Right. If you were not in energy this year.
Right, exactly. Or, you know, look at last year, technology. Technology's getting killed right now.
Right.
And it was so hot and you feel bad for, you know, everybody jumped on Kathy Wood's bandwagon from ARK Investments.
Craziness.
Right when she was at the top, they all jumped on her bandwagon, and now she's the person that everybody likes to make fun of, and it's not her. She is brilliant. It's that she invests in emerging technology.
I'd like to say, you know, I'm a CPA and a financial guy, and mostly in operational finance. I started my career in public accounting, but, you know, you think financial guys know better. And the reality was, I read The Simple Path to Wealth, and about page 100, I went over to my computer and opened a Vanguard account, and I proceeded to just start dumping all the individual name stocks I had and dumping it into index funds.
Absolutely, yeah.
It was like, if I was living this way when I was, you know, just learning and starting out, or even somewhere around 35 or 40, having gone through the 87, you know, market, you know, shift and
you were
Y2K and
based on what you told me earlier, you were here probably when Enron was here.
I literally, my first week when I changed jobs, I worked in the oil field service business, and our CEO walks in the very first week. We're in a staff meeting in one of those, you know, think tank rooms with the whiteboards all the way around. He walks in the door, Joe, and he says, first of all, do any of you guys own Enron stock? You may want to step out and sell it. And the second thing he says is, there's going to be some great people on the street. Let's hire the ones we need and jump on them.
Like right now.
Yeah.
Well, and that was the horrible thing, right? There were maybe 4 people, maybe 10 that knew what was going on. And there were so many secretaries that lost their jobs, so many support people, an
international tax lady. And she taught me a lesson that I didn't learn the easy way, which is, when you invest in your company stock or your options, sell them and liquidate them and diversify. You're counting on those guys for your paycheck every week.
Yeah.
And you don't need too much risk. Moving closer to the wrap up here, I want to talk a little bit more about one of the things you talk about in the book is, you know, when people have a top line and a bottom line, you know, they can increase that gap a little bit. But one of the easiest ways to make up headway and get to financial independence quicker is growing the top line. And right now in this current market, people have a lot of leverage if they want to really get what they're worth. And companies have kind of got a tough position where their top talent has a lot of opportunity. And if you want to grow that top line and ask for that raise, this isn't a regular year. This is like a very high probability you're going to get it.
Yeah. And studies show that even in a year that's not like this year, you're going to get it. Your boss wants to give you a raise, you just haven't asked, or if you have asked, you haven't asked in the right way. And think about it this way. You know, when you talk about how crazy things are, inflation number was just what, 7.5%? If you don't get a 7.5% raise, you are not even keeping up.
You're losing ground.
Absolutely. So a 7.5% raise is just standing still. You have to get the
historically inflation was running around 2.5% or something in that range. So you're right. You're treading water. Everybody goes to the gas pump, right? And they see how much it's going to come out of their pocket every time they fill up right now, and they feel it.
Yeah,
it's real.
Yep.
You know, I want to wrap up because I know we're running up against a time constraint here shortly. Is there anything else about this book that, we didn't cover? I mean, I have tons of things I'd love to talk about, but I do want to say that there's some great information in the book. It's written in a way you can digest it. If you like a little humor, this is definitely the book you want to grab.
If you don't like humor.
There's going to be some humor in this book. We should fully disclose that, Joe. But there's also some great lessons in the content and real situations that you can imagine or may even live through them yourself, right?
Yeah, thanks. There is one thing in the back of the book that I want to talk about briefly, which is having advisors around you. And I know a lot of the fire community, especially when I am in those forums and somebody talks about their advisor, everybody says, fire your advisor because you're smart enough to do this yourself, which I think is ridiculous. And the reason I think it's ridiculous is because that's not the right question. Of course, you're smart enough to do it yourself.
Right.
But we all have blind sides. And when I was a financial planner, I did find people that they didn't need to hire me, but I never found anybody that was doing stuff perfectly. So surrounding yourself with brainiacs who know more than you do about certain, and I'm not even talking about money anymore. I'm just talking about your life.
Right. Life coaches, skills, continuous improvement is something that takes effort, and maybe you can't see it yourself or your spouse can't see it. And getting other people in your corner can make a difference.
Absolutely. And let me define just very briefly what I mean, because when I say hire advisors, I'm going to tell you what I mean and what I don't mean just very quickly.
Right. There is a chapter 14 that also talks about financial advisors.
It does.
In the book.
Yes.
So you're talking in a broader sense, right?
Absolutely. Advisors, just when you, no, I'm actually going to talk about what's in chapter 14 a little bit here. And that's this. If you have advisors that take it from you and you meet with them once or twice a year and you're like, hey, how did my money do? Fire those people or redefine the relationship.
Right.
And an analogy that I like, and I don't know if it's in the book or not, is Mary Barra at General Motors. GM is not the Wall Street darling. GM has struggled, but look at how they've stayed relevant and how Mary's kept them in the game.
They've reinvented themselves.
They totally have, and they're in the conversation still, which is amazing after all the things that they went through. So I really credit her. Mary is the CEO of that company, which you should be with your personal finances. Mary does not go to all her VPs and go, okay, you guys do the car thing for the next 6 months and I'll come back and see how you did. No.
You got to rely on experts in their fields.
Yes, but you've got to be the CEO, which means you still go to the meetings, you still go to Camp Phi if you want to do that stuff, you still read the books, you still listen to the podcast, you do all the stuff, but you still have these smart people around you like Mary has her VPs that help her do a better job. Do not abdicate your throne to somebody else. Hire people, or, if you can't hire people, just surround yourself with people. Take smart people to breakfast and ask them how they did it.
Yeah, I had a lunch with a guy today, last week, and we talked a lot about something, but just connecting with other people. One of the things, OG said this in one of your episodes, and it just sticks with me. He talks about financial advisor client that he had, and it was a guy a guy he talked to, and he thought he had everything figured out. I mean, he had this $5 or $6 million bond portfolio that was paying all of next to nothing, and he could live off the interest.
Yeah, he was good.
And OG's comment that just stuck with me is, what do you tell this guy? He could have left his kids $20 million in 10, 20 years when he passed away, but all that would ever be there is that $5 million, and so just realizing, take the blinders off. Get another perspective and just see what other things might be out there you don't know about or haven't thought about, and then be vulnerable and willing to listen.
And as a guy who does stuff in my community in Texarkana, and I'm on a board that helps build walking trails. It's all citizens. We have a budget of about zero, and we go out and we help the cities.
You have work days, right?
Yes, we do that, and we help them raise money. We do a great half marathon in Texarkana because Texarkana is in 2 states, so it's called Run the Line, where you run down the state line road. But think about what he could have done for his community and the legacy, not even just his kids, but his community, his things he cared about, people he cared about. And that was my favorite part of that too, where he's like, maybe this guy didn't think big enough. Like, do you really want to end where, hey, I'm okay? Well, good for you. Good for you.
You know, in the conclusion of the book, you talk about the interview that you use is one from Gene Chatsky about using your resources well. And I think that speaks a lot to this. You know, and one of the key points there is, you know, in the bigger picture, what do you really want from your money? First up is freedom. Then you talk about flexibility and time. Those three seem to come up a lot. And then Gene responded, they really do when you think about it. What does money really buy you? The realization that money is just a tool, and people who continue to think it's just about money haven't yet realized that money is the tool that we use to get what we want out of life. Isn't that incredible?
It's great. And she's amazing, by the way. I love her.
Yeah. And the perfect interview for the last conclusion section of the book, I think. Well, Joe, I appreciate you spending the time with us here today, and I'm hoping that the rest of the book tour goes a little smoother than today did, because you might be on a roll, you know, and I don't want to set a trend here, but if you needed help out in San Francisco, my wife's cousin's out there, so. You know,
all right.
Yeah, he just went to work for Patreon, so.
Wow. But all I thought about all day was there's an upside to us doing these at microbreweries.
I think you're absolutely right. I was going to ask you if there was a little trend in the type of venue, but you do tell me that you're going to change from time to time depending on what city you're in, right?
Yeah.
So, but this has been tremendous. I really wish you and Emily the best of luck with the Stack book launch. Your super serious guide to modern money management.
Absolutely. And if you want to join us, stackingbenjamins.com/stacked has all the cities. There's links to Eventbrite. If there's not a link yet, there will be. It means we're still working on it. So You'll see the end of the tour. Just keep hitting refresh every few days, and you'll see that we'll get dates. We get new dates every day. Yeah, and you can Google, you know, Stack Book Tour, and it'll come right up in Google. I will add links in the show notes to the Stacking Benjamins page, as well as the tour information, and we'll be sure and share that. Where's the best place for someone to buy this book that helps the booksellers the most? You know, I really like my independent bookstore. And I know we're going to be in some Barnes & Nobles, which is fine. Yeah. These places where we all get inspiration from are disappearing. So buy it from there. And I'll tell you this, if you're somebody who's where I was in the early 90s when I was really struggling with money and living paycheck to paycheck, don't buy my book. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to the library. I want you to get it and read the first quarter of it about stacking your first Benjamin. And when you stack that first Benjamin, then you can buy your own that you can have your mom sign, you can write in, you can do all the stuff in, but go to the library first to get your start. And then later on, you can use it like I use the Hardy Boys Detective Manual. Yeah. After you stack your first Benjamin, you'll be ready for part 2, building a stack of Benjamins. Then part 3, holding on to Benjamins without burying them in the backyard. Great investment strategy there. And then part 4, finally stacking Benjamins on top of other Benjamins. Buying some security and comfort. Yeah. I tell you what, those 4 parts, you can learn an awful lot about personal finance and really have a lot of fun doing it. So that'll be a great way to sign off from this episode. I'm Lambo, the FILIGHTER, here with Joe Saul-Sehy, and we're talking about Stacked, your super serious guide to modern money management. Thanks for listening. FILIGHTERs, we're out.
Nothing's far away, nothing's far away, nothing's near. Far away, nothing's near. Another day, another way, another day, another way. Hold me in the sun, in the rain, baby, baby. Do the same.
I don't have a TV face or a radio voice, but I'm live. Okay,
Isn't it a TV voice or radio face?
I don't have either one, man.
I wish I even had a radio face. I don't even have that.
So, Joe, I've got to ask this question. You know, I remember talking to you at FinCon, and we're sitting at a microbrewery at FinCon, and you said you took the train from Texarkana to Austin. What?
No, to Dallas. To Dallas.
Okay, so you tweeted again. You did another train ride.
I did.
What is it with you and the trains?
Oh, I got to tell you what I love. Well, I love trains. I wanted to have a train set when I was a kid, and I never did. I bought all kinds of stuff for a train set, and I never set it up. My mom, in that box of stuff,
right.
My old train stuff was there too.
Oh,
yes.
I had a train when I was a kid. HO scale. It's just it was probably a little older than your train set.
My friend Len Penzo, who's a contributor on our show, he's getting ready to retire, and when he retires this year, he's already started working on his train. He took his son's room when his son moved out, and he
repurposed it. Huh?
Absolutely. No, and he's got the board set up all over the room. Like the whole room is going to be a train layout.
So at the ergonomic work level, right?
Yes, absolutely. No, it's cool. But here's what I love. I love the middle of America. I think that the middle of America gets a short shrift from a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you got these great older cities. Like I knew nothing about Kansas City until a few years ago. And I went to Kansas City maybe 5-6 years ago. What a great town.
Well, my son's at WashU in St. Louis.
Oh, just
and
St.
I had
Louis.
no idea how
Yes.
much history that city had and how old it is. And he's right there by the medical center, right at the end of the park, right? And
Yes.
And he walks to, now he's grown up, raised in Texas, right? But, hey, do you drive to school when the weather's really bad? He said, Dad, I'm not a fair weather walker.
Good job.
I said,
Nice job.
You're the man, buddy. You can go through that 8-year PhD program.
Right.
Yeah. So,
I'm an advocate for high-speed rail because I think it's going to bring back those cities. I think it's going to really bring back those cities. So if you can connect these cities, if you can connect Chicago to St. Louis and get there in 2 hours, or an hour and a half,
the Houston-Dallas one is one. It's
Yeah.
only going to have one stop, and that's outside
College
of
Station.
Navasota near College Station,
Yeah,
right?
that's
So,
right.
and they're also building what we call the Aggie Expressway, but there's a toll road that takes you down from almost Highway 6, but just jog over to Plantersville, right straight down into Houston.
Boom.
And it's a game changer on going to the airport and stuff. And when you can live somewhere and be less than an hour and a half from a major airport,
Yeah.
get on a plane. My daughter went out to California last week, and I said, isn't it amazing? You woke up here, and at 2:00 in the afternoon, you're sending me pictures out your hotel window of the stadium there in San Francisco.
I know, isn't that nuts?
And it's like, that's magic.
I know.
I used to, fly internationally a lot. You go to sleep and you wake up. This one ultra long flight. It's 11 hours from Houston to Moscow and another 11 hours from Moscow to Singapore.
Oh, man.
You had to get off the plane, and there's snow on the ground in Moscow. You get back on the plane, then you go down to Singapore, get off the plane, and you sweat like the daylights because an island in the middle of the ocean.
And you're like, what the heck's going on?
It's a little bit humid down there.
Yeah.
But traveling is something else. But, you're combining planes and trains. I'm sure plenty of automobiles. You took a lift on the way over. You're going to see it all on this trip. It is, one of my themes when in high school. Two things. One was I use this phrase, make memories. You are going to make some memories on this trip. It's going to be incredible. Incredible. And the other one's make it happen, and you're literally willing this book tour to happen no matter what, bags or no bags, buddy. You got to move forward.
I got to tell you there's a quote that I think about a lot, and I'm not gonna directly quote it, but it's Michelangelo. Michelangelo talks about the problem most people have in life is not setting their bar too high and not reaching it, set we bar too low, and we reach it all the time. Kind of like that guy who's fine, right? His bar's not high enough.
Right.
And so when we started peeling this off, I'm like, you know what? If I'm doing a book tour, how many of these am I going to do? I'm 54 years old. I don't know how many I'm going to do. I don't know what happens next year. So let's do it. And Cheryl and I put our heads together, and being away from the person I love is hard. It is
I was going to ask about that because that was the hardest thing when I had kids in middle school and high school, and my longest trip was 3 weeks to the Far East, and I said, never again am I going to do that. And it's hard when you're away.
Yeah. Luckily, we broke it up like that. I've got 17 days to start, then I'm home for 3, then I'm away for 5, then I'm home for 5, then I'm gone for like 22 days.
Is Cheryl going to join you a little bit in those
She
trips?
is. Yeah. She's going to join me. she's going to join me in Cleveland around Easter weekend.
Okay.
Because that's where we have a lot of family in that area, and so the Thursday before that weekend is the Cleveland thing, and then I took 3 days off because nobody's going to want to do an event during that time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
she's going to fly up there. So that 22-day stretch, the big long stretch, she's going to meet me at the halfway point.
Okay.
She's going to meet me. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it'll be tough, and I know the ones around you will miss you while you're gone. But you'll be having a good time too.
It depends because we have game night and I win a fair amount, and now my buddies are like, "Oh, we get to win now."
Yeah, I listened to the Matt and Board podcast on the way here. A friend of mine, Austin, does this podcast. You would enjoy it.
I would.
It's got gaming theory and the origin of games, and
I'm in.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well if you want to listen to Austin on his Matt and Board podcast. It's a great one. He's a super guy, the scientist type guy too. So you're getting the real deal when a scientist plays games.
That's my thing. Well, for me, that's my downtime. I mean, my brain continually is going, and I would rather play a game than watch TV.
Wow, that's great. And I tell you, I found, I retired a little over 2 years ago, and at first, I've got in my study there, I've got a TV up on top of the shelves. I have CNBC going. It doesn't take you long to realize you don't need to watch talking heads. At some point, kind of also in your investing approach, you're not a headline reacting guy.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, these guys are doing nothing but creating excitement, shock and awe to get advertisers.
Absolutely.
Right? And I don't want to hear about some quick way to trade your way to success.
You just get depressed.
And a platform, you've got some stuff in the book about shortcuts with money. Yeah. And the reality is there are no shortcuts. That's what I tell my kids, but, I try to live it too. Things happen when you do the right thing consistently over time, and you will win if you do that. It's one of those life lessons. You have to learn it the hard way a few times, but hopefully not an expensive way, and when there's still plenty of time to recover.
Absolutely. Man, you nailed that lamp.
Yeah. That's part of
everybody just heard Lambo make a huge point, and he put his hand down and didn't look, and just man.
I know you can imagine what we look like on this episode. That's why there's not a YouTube channel for this one, man. But I think that's the doorbell ringing.
It's like ringing the cowbell.
I think the after show is, hey, we do.
It's like you're back there with the Aggies.
We need a lot more cowbell. Okay, that's it for the after show. We're signing off live on the Stack Book Tour here in Houston, Texas. We're out. Episode 13 of the FILIGHTER podcast was recorded Thursday, March 3rd, 2022. Post-production on March 7th in the FILIGHTER studio.